The Oklahoma City Thunder shows you the good, the bad, and the ugly against Brooklyn as they gut out a win. Why are the Thunder playing so many double big lineups? How has the Thunder defense slipped a little bit? And what went wrong and right against Brooklyn? We're going to get into all of that on today's show.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're diving into the Thunder getting a win against the Brooklyn Nets, though not in the fashion everyone would have expected. The double big lineups are a big topic. The defense is an even bigger topic, and so much more. But the Thunder did win 129-121, but it came in a unique way. Oklahoma City was once down by 18 points to the scrappy Brooklyn Nets. And look, the first thing to mention is that Brooklyn is better than the record indicates. They're a scrappy team. They're a well-coached team. Since the beginning of February, that they have the best defense. Like they're really good for what they are. They should not be getting the Thunder down 18 points. They should not be then slipping in that lead and then getting them back down 15 points. Like that should not happen. And that's what grew the frustration for many of you watching this game unfold. I want to preface everything by saying you'd much rather win ugly, which this was an ugly win, than to lose pretty or to just flat out lose. So you take the wins as they come, especially in an 82-game season, but there was a lot to pick apart. There was a lot to clean up from a game like this. But even with that being said, the residue from this game is not going to linger in the traditional sense, right? Because there's not a lot to change in the grand scheme of things. Let's start with the defense, which has been the topic of conversation. The defense was horrible, awful, putrid in the second half against Minnesota and in the first half of this game. And that really stemmed from two things. One, the double big lineups do change their identity a little bit too much for my liking defensively. And we're going to talk about the double big specifically in the future. But number two, just good, clean fashion, intensity, effort, energy, engagement, however you want to package effort. That's what it came down to defensively in this game. Credit to Brooklyn for hitting their open shots, but the three-point barrage that Brooklyn went on, most of them were just clean, beautiful looks. And it stemmed from not having crisp rotations, not closing out as hard as you usually do, not being able to switch 1 through 5, not playing physical enough. And so when I talk about the residue from this game, those are all things that, yes, they happened. And they happened in the second half of last game. They happened in the first half of this game. We also have to remember that this is not a 2-game season and that a championship isn't won in February and that we have a massively large sample size of this team not only being a good defense, but a historically great defense. So it boils down to something as simple as this. If the Thunder play defense the way they did in the second half against Minnesota in the first half tonight, they are not going to win very many playoff games. They're certainly not going to fulfill, right, their goals of going to the NBA Finals, possibly winning a championship. They're just not. It was not good enough. If the Thunder played defense the way that they turned it on to start the third quarter, and especially in that fourth quarter, then they are who we thought they've been this whole season. And so I put the defense like this. Part of why it's so loud whenever they do something wrong defensively is because of the standard that they're held to, right? This team is built on the backbone of its defense and has been since Mark took the job in Oklahoma City. They've been building this defense where, he maximized those teams on that end of the floor whenever they were only winning 20-something games. Like that was his big calling card. And in this season, they're a historically great defense with a good offense. And so it would be like those historic Warrior teams, right? If they had a game where they shot 0 for 27 from 3, then yeah, the sky would be falling and you're not going to be winning that game no matter who you play, because that's what you're built on. And yeah, the Thunder should have been able to wipe the floor with Brooklyn and run them out of their own gym. But they didn't do the thing that makes them great. They didn't do the thing that separates them. They did not separate from Brooklyn in this game. And so, like, every time the Thunder get down or lose a game or even are threatened to lose a game, people want to take it and extrapolate that to the playoffs. And this time, I think the extrapolation is very easy to do. If they play defense like that, they're going to lose in the playoffs. Hard stop. But you have to remember the history of this team, that they're not going to play defense that way in bigger moments. And even in the midst of the regular season, there's been 2 games where I feel comfortable saying that the other team didn't just make their shots. The other team didn't just run good offense. It wasn't just good shot making. It was flat out controllable effort that was not exerted. And I really hate to talk about effort, because I think that sometimes you can use that as a crutch. But in the case of these last 2 games, it's been that simple. The players talked about it after Monday's game. I'm sure they're going to talk about it after today's game, that they didn't give enough effort, intensity, physicality, the words that you want to use to describe defense. Not been good enough the last 2 games. I can't state it any more clearly. But every team's going to have games like this, and you hope that they happen now and not in the playoffs. And yes, if the Thunder play defense this way in the playoffs, they're not good enough to win. Just as though if those historic Warrior teams didn't shoot the ball really well in the playoffs, they weren't good enough to win. And so that's the biggest thing, is that this team will go as its defense goes, because defense can lead to easy offense. This team will go as SGA goes, because SGA is your best player. And this team will go as your complementary players hit shots, because they're going to have to step up whenever all the attention gets shifted to SGA in the playoffs. And they're either going to or they're not going to, right? They're going to play a historically great defensive level in the playoffs, or they're not going to. They're going to hit their shots, or they're not going to in the playoffs. So it'll be very interesting to see, but I would totally agree that the ugly part of this game, when we're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly part of this game was its first half defense. And that's what led to, a louder feeling about the offense. Because, whenever you let up in the first half of this game, when you let Brooklyn score 76 points in the first half, your 61 is just not good enough. Your 61 looks terrible. But if you would have held Brooklyn to a more respectable mark at halftime, then your offense isn't as massive as a talking point as it ended up being at halftime of this game on social media. Because I thought that the offense overall looked good in the sense of what they were generating. There were spurts where the shots were not falling, just like what happened in the fourth quarter against Minnesota. And you couldn't make up for that. But again, to me, it's always about the defense for this team. Because the way you make up for the shots not falling, it's not the drive to the rim, right? You don't want to pass up wide open threes. It's not the drive to the rim. Because again, in the first half, as bad as you thought the offense played, they shot 1 more 3 than they did 2. And one of those threes was a Wiggins throw it up at the buzzer of the shot clock. He had to get rid of it. So it's not necessarily about the shot balance or the shot diet, because I think that the shot quality, as I reviewed on Thunder on SI, I put out a big film review article that has clips of examples of what I'm talking about whenever I say the process was really good against Minnesota despite the box score results. You can go read that if you want to see kind of this illustrated in front of you. But because we can't play clips on this show because of copyright. But I thought that the process was still there in the first half against Brooklyn. You can't make up for the missed shots, though, if you're not playing defense and you're letting Brooklyn score, whatever we said, 71 points or whatever it was in the first half. It's just not 76 points. It's just not there. That's not a recipe for success. So that was ugly. And then they did the most uncharacteristic things that pile into the ugliness of not only are you just not playing good enough defense, but you're turning the ball over way too much, uncharacteristically, at times unforced, fouling a little bit too much, but the fouls come with the way the Thunder play defense. That's why they're the third most whistled team in the NBA. And it all just happened at the same exact time to present this avalanche. But then you got the good, where everything flipped at the same exact time. Started making shots, started getting in transition and running, started to present even the smallest amount of effort on the defensive end, and you completely shut down Brooklyn. So it all kind of comes out in the wash in that sense, but the defense was not good enough for 90% of this game, and they turned it on at the right time. They got to win, and that's what's most important here. But the defense also was not playing to a level that you have to play to win games in that first half, and they didn't do it, of course, in the second half against Minnesota. That's kind of where it becomes hard to go on these massive rampages, because it seems pretty obvious, right? Like, is it not abundantly clear that for as much as you want to pick apart Mark or pick apart the players or pick apart the strategies, if you don't play defense, you ain't going to win. If you don't exert effort, you're not going to win. And you just have to bank on the fact that they're going to do that come playoff time. Coming up, though, let's talk double big lineups, because that was also a problem both for the defense and for the team. What looked good about them, what looked bad about them, what looked ugly about those double big lineups, and why are the Thunder still doing it? But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. Go check it out today at FanDuel.com, folks. FanDuel is incredible. When the game tips off and the NBA action is just getting started, there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip or want to get in on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action with FanDuel. If you're looking for a bigger payout, try their combining live bets in the same game parlay. FanDuel is a lot of fun to keep yourself locked into a game. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits by visiting FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com to join today for your shot at $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Make every moment more with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And you can bet on some NBA action tonight as the Mavericks host the Hornets, minus 10.5 for Dallas in that game. Check them out today at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Let's talk double bigs. The Thunder, since Chet Holmgren has returned, have started Chet and Hartenstein together. The Thunder have played that lineup a ton, and there's been some improvement. There's been some still flaws, and it's limited their defense. So why are they continuing to play these guys together? Well, the first thing you have to do is some homework a little bit to get the clear picture, because we can't make this whole show just about this segment. During the All-Star break, just as a quick scroll down the feed, wherever you're listening to this at, we talked with Nick Crane about how the Thunder are going to have to be comfortable risking or outright losing games for the sake of getting better in the long end, in the long term of playing these double big lineups, even whenever there's no matchup reason to play them, even whenever it's costing you, like it did in the first half of this game. You've got to play them because those two guys have to gel and get comfortable. It's not necessarily even about them getting better. It's about them getting comfortable, which in turn makes them a little bit better. But it's not about them like improving or making this their calling card or their staple. But there are going to be matchups in the playoffs where you have to play those guys and you have to use them both. And you need that size on the floor, and you can't be flying blind. You can't be in any sort of discomfort. The playoffs are already uncomfortable. You can't make internal things uncomfortable, if that makes sense. You can't add to that by saying, you know what, guys, let's play this lineup that we pulled the plug on after 3 games and you only got 100 possessions with it, but we got to do it now because we got to have size, right? So you have to know moving forward that the Thunder are still going to do this, and it could end up costing them games. It could have cost them this game against Brooklyn. Arguably should have cost them this game against Brooklyn, short of the comeback that they were able to pull off. But it's for the greater good of what the future holds. With that being said, as I said, since the day Hartenstein signed, you can even scroll back to the preseason where we talked about what should be the starting lineup. I am not in favor of starting Isaiah Hartenstein in the playoffs, or at least not playing him starting level minutes. I think that this Thunder team is at their best with only one center on the floor. In my opinion, I would start, Shai, Kaysen, Dort, Dub, Chet. In the preseason, in the offseason, I thought they'd start Caruso, but they seem to have a vision of not starting him, which is fine because he does add a huge spark plug off the bench. But I think that the starting lineup or the bulk lineup should end up being those 5 guys with Kaysen in the starting 5, because one, it makes staggering the bigs a bit easier because you could start them both together in the playoffs and stagger them, but it's not as clean as bringing one off the bench. But aside from that, you're just better with one center on the floor. And the Thunder know that. I mean, Mark pre-game on Monday was asked about playing with the double big lineups, and he said that they know what they have when they have one big on the floor. They know what they have whenever they go small. They don't know at all what this double big stuff looks like. What is its advantages? What are its limitations? And sometimes you can think of a lineup on paper and think of the advantages. For example, let's take this lineup. How many of you at this time last year thought Chet Holmgren would be better next to a traditional big? He is not, right? Like, we're seeing it right now. He's not better or more impactful at the 4 spot. He's just not. Neither is this team by and large better with him at the 4 spot. So that's why you do it. That's why you want to get all the information possible. But they're still trying to figure that out where they feel like they have a good grasp on what they look like with no center and one center. They don't feel like they have a good grasp on what they have with double bigs, or how to get better, or how to make them more comfortable, or how to make them gel better. So it's going to keep happening. And I think it should keep happening, even if it costs you a game or two, like it should have cost you tonight. But in the playoffs, though, I think that the Thunder should be running Chet by himself, Hartenstein by himself for the majority of the game. You can throw a curveball and go small if you think that can junk up the game and make you better. And against Denver, against Dallas, against teams like that, then you throw them 2 bigs and see where it's at. Because I think that the double big stuff, the defense just is not to the historic level. It's not a terrible defense. It was more bad than good tonight, in my opinion, with those 2 guys on the floor together. But it's not the historic nature of it's not your identity, right? The identity that this team has bred, the identity of them being one of the best teams in the NBA, one of the best defenses of all time, is being able to switch, and they're able to switch 1 through 5. They're able to be physical. They're able to be aggressive. They're able to cut you off and feel comfortable with switching pick and rolls, feel comfortable with jumping the passing lanes and be up under you with all these perimeter players. When you now have 2 traditional centers and one of them you don't really feel comfortable with switching at all in the sense of 1 through 5. Of course, Hartenstein can switch a little bit. And then with Chet, he can switch, but at the 4 spot, it is a bit more awkward to do a switch 4. You would much rather just be able to have a tone-setting defender like a Kaysen Wallace out there, for me, if you're starting games. And now other things come into play when you're talking about starting lineups, so that's why I kind of use the term bulk lineups. But I do think the Thunder are at their best when they have one center on the floor. I think that they're at their best with just Hartenstein. I think that they're at their best with just Chet. I think that it maximizes both of those 2 individuals and maximizes the players around them whenever there's only one center. As much as I can acknowledge that, I also think it's very smart what the Thunder are doing to not just fall back on that, because not to throw stones at last year's team, but last year's team did a lot of stuff that worked in the regular season that did not get them better for the playoffs. So yeah, if the Thunder wanted to win this game by 20, they could have just played the best version of themselves for 48 minutes. What does winning this game by 20 do if you're not using it to get yourself better? The way that, you could have won by 20, I think, if you would have just played your normal lineups, let's say. But doing it this way, you still won, but even if you lost, at least you're still learning and growing, because in these short sample sizes of whatever it is now, 4 or 5 games, I do feel like the offense of the double bigs and the comfortability of how they're finding shots both for each other, because they've gotten really good at running big-to-big actions, and spacing the floor for other players, I think that has taken massive leaps over this last week and a half or whatever it's been of them playing together. I really do. Defensively, though, I think it just changes you and the way that you're designed to play way too much for my liking to do it as your A lineup. I think that your fastball is still just one center on the floor. I think your fastball is still Chet Holmgren on the floor as the lone big, and then you use Hartenstein off the bench. That's what I would do if I was Mark. We'll see what he ends up doing come playoff time. But I don't think that they're going to abandon double bigs. I would feel confident in saying that I know they're not going to abandon double bigs moving forward in the regular season and even in the playoffs, because there will be matchups where you need it in the playoffs. But that's where I'm at on double bigs. Where are you at on the double big lineup? Let me know down below in the comment section. What a game from Cason Wallace. What a game from Aaron Wiggins. Those two guys really turned the tide of this game. For Wiggins, it was his 24 points. He shot 58% from the floor, went 2 for 7 from three, had 5 rebounds to go at 3 assists. For Cason, when this team looked like at times in the first half, it was just sleepwalking. It was playing with its food, so to say. It looked to the same disengagement of how they looked against Minnesota. Cason flipped the game on its head and gave you that spark that you really need. We'll talk about how he did that coming up. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at Robinhood. Go check out Robinhood today because Robinhood is awesome. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privilege of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth for any net worth are now available for you. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive 3% boost on your annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rates are subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 per month for 1 year for the first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings claim. Interest rate is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. We're diving into the Oklahoma City Thunder beating the Brooklyn Nets, and it was on the backs of Wiggins and Wallace off the bench. Wallace went for 13 points. He had 3 steals, 2 assists, and 3 blocks. He shot 6 for 10 from the floor, 1 for 3 from 3. But his defensive motor and energy was just contagious, and he was a plus 26 for Wiggins, a plus 17 for Wallace, and a plus 27 for Alex Caruso, who, despite only scoring 5 points, you don't win this game without Alex Caruso and all that he did to discombobulate Brooklyn Nets offensive possessions and how active that he was. And again, another energy provider for this Thunder team whenever they really desperately needed some energy. They went to 4, really 5 first quarter minutes from Jay Will. I thought that might have been, this is pure speculation, but I thought that might have been Mark just trying something of this team was clearly voided of juice. They were clearly voided of energy, effort, intensity, and we can talk all day long. We can talk till the cows come home, as we used to say back home in Lawton, which I don't really know where the cow's home is. I don't really know if that saying is implying that cows were going to show up at our house or that cows do have a home of their own. But we used to say it. And when we say that, we're talking about how long we can talk about something, and we can talk that long about Jay Will's defense, which is not good. He does not deter you at the rim. He's gotten better. He continues to steadily improve. He's not there yet, which is why we talked on Monday about, people were freaking out about the Thunder staying small on Monday, even some calling it like stubborn by Mark to stay small. Well, then those same people in the 5 minutes that Jay Will played today were complaining about how it was a layup line for Brooklyn. So you can say whatever you want to about Jay Will. This is not about Jay Will's like on-court presence. It's about the fact that when you put him in, no matter his limitations, he's going to compete his butt off. He's going to try hard. He's going to bring you that juice. And he was a +5, surprisingly, for as bad as his defense was at times in those 5 minutes. But he also was the first guy to really jumpstart and say, no, we need to take this game seriously. We need to compete. And so he was a great competitor in those 5 minutes, something that can go under the radar, especially with all that happened, the ebbs and flows of this game. There's a couple times where it looked like the Thunder were going to get back in it and control it. Then they didn't. Then they did. And so they ended up winning the game. So that can get lost a little bit in that shuffle. I thought Chet Holmgren was excellent. Chet Holmgren was arguably your best player tonight. I know that Shai had the 27 points, and Shai was good. I'm not trying to discount Shai. But what Chet did on both ends, racking up the 3 blocks, getting the couple steals, and then running the floor in transition, which was hit or miss, but he hit a lot of the times in transition tonight, getting 22 points, getting 17 boards, 4 assists. And you look at how he ended possessions. He had 3 blocks, 2 steals, and 13 of those 17 were defensive rebounds for Chet Holmgren. 2 for 4 from 3. His shot continues to look much improved. It's quicker, it's smoother than it was against Toronto, and it's progressed that way since that return. And then he went 58% from the floor in this game. I thought Jada was really good, 22 points, and you just see how the game opens up for him when he plays alongside of a big. The fourth quarter happened and the overtime happened against Minnesota. He was not up to the standard of what you need him to be to reach your goals and aspirations, but it's easier to push him to that standard when he's flanked by Hartenstein, Holmgren, and the full complement of this cast. And J-Dub was able to get downhill in that fourth quarter, the and one, kind of the exclamation point, so to say, on this comeback win for this team. Hartenstein, 13 points, 3 assists, two rebounds. He's really good at keeping the ball in flow and making decisions out of the short roll that lead to points and lead to buckets, even if he's not the one who's outright credited with the assists. And then Lu Dort. Lu Dort was part of the ugly group that we had in that first segment. Even his defense was not to Lu Dort standards. Now, it's not to say that he was a turnstile out there, but when you're this good, like when you're this good of a defender and your energy wanes even a tad bit, then you will be put under the microscope and you will be criticized. He did draw the illegal screen, but he just overall didn't have it, only played 20 minutes because he didn't have it. Not even so much on the defensive end, but offensively, just ice cold. Since February began, he's dipped in his shooting. Last couple of games, he's been very ice cold. He's 1 for 5 in this one from the 3-point line. One with Wiggins. And that's what I think that Mark doesn't get enough credit for. Everybody rushed to criticize Mark on Monday. And then today, I don't know how many of you are going to turn the other cheek and just say, look at what he did to make the adjustments in this game. In the first quarter, the adjustment was trying to play Jay Will and trying to get somebody to jumpstart you. And Jay Will did compete and did bring the energy. And then he goes away from a guy who has a ton of pedigree in this league, a guy who's a bona fide starter for your team, a guy who is one of your top players in Lu Dort, in favor of playing the hot hands of Wallace and Wiggins and making an adjustment there. I thought that he made the adjustment too, where he was having Shai play with Hartenstein and Jada play with Chet, and those two guys were able to work it out. Both sets of those two guys were able to work it out on the offensive end really well. I think that Mark made adjustments. The only adjustment that he didn't make was playing the double big lineups like too much if you're trying to win this game. However, we've already addressed how that isn't the end goal. Like the end goal, yes, is always to win when the ball's in the air, but the greater goal is to play those two guys and let them get on the same page on both ends of the floor to the best of your ability before you know that you can sink back into what always works. And it goes back to the last thing I want to say is more so about Monday's game, because I thought that Mark illustrated what we were talking about on Monday after the Monday loss. Whenever he was talking about Shai, he said, could Shai have taken over in that fourth quarter and taken over against that pressure? Sure. And could he have won the game? And did we have a better chance of winning that game if Shai did that and was more aggressive? Yeah, probably. Maybe. I think is what he actually ended up saying was maybe. But does that get you better for the playoffs? No. And that's what we said on Monday. Shai himself has talked about how, as a leader last year, he didn't do enough to get guys ready for the situations that they were going to be put into in the playoffs. On Monday, he was overly concerned with putting guys in those situations, and it's for the greater good, even though you lost that game Monday, because we've already seen that in the playoffs, Shai can break these zones, Shai can break these doubles, Shai can break these pressures. Go back and watch that Dallas series. Dallas was not concerned with anybody else on the floor. And Shai averages 32 points. And Shai was not the reason why you lost game 6. Shai was awesome in game 6. So Shai knows how to handle all of this. Shai knows how to handle the pressure tonight. But what does it really prove, or how does it get you closer to a championship if he just bails you out every single time in the 82-game season? Whenever, with the caveat of, whenever you have such a massive cushion on first place. I mean, they are 9 games up of the 1 seed. We're running out of time here, folks, for that collapse to happen. If you're thinking of that, it was like, the season's almost over and they're 9 games up on the 1 seed. Like, they pretty much have the 1 seed cemented for all intents and purposes. They're the 1 seed in the West. So it just makes them better to play this way. But again, this game was frustrating. Even in a win, they didn't play well, and it was not good enough. But it was good enough to get a win. They did have some issues, but when you really take a step back and you get away from the moment and you get away from the natural intensity of watching this team, and for those of you listening, rooting for this team, like, you can see that all that went wrong isn't indicative of like what the future holds. It's just not. So we'll see, because if the Thunder do play that bad of a defense, again, they're not going to win. So if they give effort, they're gonna have a great shot, and they need to give effort, and I think that they will give effort in April. Credit to them for turning it around. Again, this is good and bad and ugly. It was ugly, it was bad, and then it was good in the fourth quarter, where the Thunder did dig deep and turn it around. I give them a lot of credit for that. Obviously, it's easier to dig deep whenever you're on the brink of losing after a massive collapse, but we've seen in the NBA how many teams just wouldn't care, and the Thunder's care factor in the fourth quarter was really good, so they deserve some credit there. Coming up on this show, though, on this feed, I guess we'll have another show for you tomorrow to preview the Atlanta game. We'll take some of your mailbag questions, so drop your questions on YouTube, drop your questions on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles, and then after the Atlanta game, we'll have another show recapping the Hawks game. After the Spurs game on Sunday, we'll have another show. We're a 5-day-a-week podcast, mandatory, but we do overtime whenever the Thunder play on the weekends. So subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from, so you never miss an episode, because it's Locked On Thunder, your team every day. Until next time, be good and be good to one another.